said 150 conservatives were going to be gathering somewhere in Rhode Island, and I thought, this is historic. I have to be. So, and when Meg asked me to come, I was very honored to be asked. I used to run a town committee in my town up in Milford, Connecticut, which is near New Haven, although I guess you can tell from my accent I may be from the Bronx, and to come up here and be surrounded by so many Red Sox fans, it takes a little extra. Well, my wife is from Massachusetts, and we have a mixed marriage, and it works. Anyway, I was asked to talk about how I became a conservative and my thoughts on Ronald Reagan and Bill Buckley and Ronald Reagan's relationship, and a lot's been said here tonight, so I'm going to forego some of the personal stuff, other than to say I voted for John Anderson, and 4 years later I was campaigning for Ronald Reagan on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and that's a dangerous, dangerous task, but that man moved my needle 180 degrees, and he spoke to something deep inside of me, and I assume deep inside of most of you and most Americans. Now, I can carry a tune, and on Sunday at Christ the Redeemer Church in Milford, Connecticut at the 10:30 Mass, if you want to go, you can hear me sing some popular ballads or a couple of hymns. But trying to get people to sing hymns it's difficult. But if you ask people, if I say the recessional hymn, and this is something that probably, let's say it's the Sunday around the 4th of July, the recessional hymn is number 502, America the Beautiful. Well, you hear, the fur balls are coming up, the hacking, and they're going to sing. And they do sing. And the reason they do is that song says something very central to them. These people believe that there are fruited plains with amber waves and of grain. They believe that there are majestic mountains that are purple. They believe that there are spacious skies, and they believe that God has shed His grace on America. And that's what Ronald Reagan spoke to. Yep. People thought he was a dimwit and a simpleton, and, well, he was simple because he spoke simple truths. And he spoke to the heart of Americans, and that's why he connected. That's why there are Reagan Republicans. Not all Republicans are Reagan Republicans.
That's right.
And there are Reagan Democrats because he spoke to them. And his image, of course, that's a Bronx thing. Excuse me. Can I get a cup of coffee when I'm finished here?
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing? Shut up! I tell the jokes. All right. Anyway, we'll get to the shining city on a hill in a second here. Let me talk briefly. I'm going to read to you briefly, because why should I tell you about Bill Buckley and Ronald Reagan when Bill Buckley can tell you about Bill Buckley and Ronald Reagan? And I'll be brief. I know reading these things, when you read past a certain point, it can bore you to tears. But, you see this cover up here on the screen. It says a lot. We, National Review, founded the conservative movement in America, the modern conservative movement. And conservatism is not only political, it's cultural, it's academic, and maybe 2 campuses in America, but somewhere. But the political conservative movement rallied around National Review. One of my predecessors, Bill Rusher, a great man, was one of the leading forces in that, and it led to the Reagan Revolution. And we are intrinsically tied with Ronald Reagan, who happened to be a member of the board of directors. And he and Bill Buckley were extremely close. Nancy and Pat Buckley, they were truly, truly very close friends. Anyway, I met Ronald Reagan. You don't care how I met him. But this is a really interesting first meeting of someone.
Yeah, we do. How did you meet him?
That's a long story. This is Bill Buckley about meeting Ronald Reagan. My speech in Beverly Hills was scheduled for 7:30, and I ate in the restaurant across from the high school auditorium with my sister-in-law. When the time came, 2 other diners also arose. They had been at the far end of the room, and their faces hadn't been visible in the dim light. "I'm Ronald Reagan. This is Nancy. I just finished your book, Up From Liberalism. The passage on Eleanor Roosevelt is very funny. He quoted it and laughed. His assignment was to introduce me to the assembly, mostly doctors. But entering the hall, we came upon a huge bump in the road. Not only was the sound system not on, the room where you turned it on was locked. They couldn't find the kid who was supposed to have turned it on, or the janitor who had the keys. And even Ronald Reagan, using his golden repertoire and tranquilizing voice to placate the large hall, was running short of diversions. That's when I espied true grit in the future president. He ascertained that the window at the end of the stage overlooked a parapet about a foot wide, which extended at the far end of the building to the window of the control room. So, he climbed out the window, arms outstretched for balance, and edged his way above the roaring traffic to the critical window, broke it open with his elbow, climbed into the room, found the switch, and flipped it, and the show was on. Also on was one of the most productive and great friendships in the last half century in America. Now, I do want to just read one other thing, because reading what someone else wrote is a lot easier than writing it yourself or winging it. But it's very important to me, to reflect a little bit on Ronald Reagan's positivism and his the metaphor he often relied on about the shining city. And this was his farewell speech, and that was one bittersweet night. You know, it was all over. And yes, George H.W. Bush was coming, but we knew that night that something very special was passing, and something that we may not see again in our lifetimes. But this is what Ronald Reagan said to the end of his farewell to America on like tonight, a cold night in January. And how stands the city on this winter night? More prosperous, more secure, and happier than it was 8 years ago. But more than that, after 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge. And her glow has held steady, no matter what storm. And she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom, for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. We've done our part. And as I walk off into the city streets, a final word to the men and women of the Reagan Revolution, the men and women across America who for 8 years did the work and brought America back. My friends, we did it. We weren't just marking time, we made a difference. We made the city stronger, we made the city freer, and we left her in good hands. And indeed, he did leave this country in good hands. And I think we'd have a different view of how things are today than how they were in January of 1989. So let me close here by stating the obvious. It's a wonderful thing to celebrate this man at this time of his 100th birthday. He deserves our attention. And we who were transformed by Ronald Reagan need to mark, again, his significance to us, to America, and to the hundreds of millions of people around the world who enjoy freedom because of the things he did. But let us never forget the question he asked in his farewell. How stands the city on this winter night? The answer is not always a good one. I thank you for having me here, and I pray to the God of America the Beautiful that he sheds a little more of his grace, especially on the Republican Party of the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. And thanks for voting to keep that.